All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the red team. But what's interesting to note about the red team, aside from the fact that when it comes to the red versus blue simulation, everybody always ends up really enjoying the red team and wants to be the red team. But aside from that, you might be asking yourself, if you're a blue teamer, why do I need to worry about the red team? Why do I need to play the red team? Well, the simple answer is when you're defending, understanding the capabilities and the offensive tactics of the adversary is really important to being able to formulate the most effective and cost-efficient defensive strategy. The problem is a lot of training out there, especially like red team versus blue team training, is that there's a really steep learning curve to be the red team. So what we've done here is we've made it very easy for anybody of any skill level, regardless of role, to play the part of the red team and learn and understand those very important tactics. So let's take a look. So the red team interface, you'll notice, is red, but it's also got some other differences. You'll notice a mode indicator, a location indicator. That's because, as we mentioned with the blue team side, we can go on site. So we can play remotely, and we can also go on site for physical security. You also play actions by spending resources, just like the blue team. You have time, but the red team, the resources are a little different. You have what's called quote-unquote hacker resources. Because it's a bit more of an abstract concept, it relates, rather than money and people type resources, it relates to more of a level of effort. That's because there's a lot more things that really go into the capabilities of the red team. If we take a look at our network map here, you'll see that all we see is the internet because we haven't discovered anything. As the red team, we have the burden of trying to discover information about our target. Looking at the action tree, you'll see that we have an action tree just like the blue team, but it's different, obviously. And you'll see that there are a lot of different actions that you would take relating to red team or adversary activities. This is anywhere from your regular cyber activity, your social engineering. We can go on site. We can do things like create malicious USBs, do USB drops, all of our stealth and post-exploitation activities, such as harvesting credentials, network evasion or intrusion detection system evasion, pilfering data, planting rogue devices, it's all here. If we look at the top of the action tree, you'll see all of the actions related to what's called the kill chain. So you have your open source intelligence or your OSINT, host scanning, port scanning, service enumeration, and then all of the different ways that we can find vulnerabilities, such as looking for public vulnerabilities, doing things like fuzzing and reverse engineering to find 0 days. That's right, we even have 0 days or vulnerabilities and exploits that haven't been publicly disclosed. And then of course we have the ability to actually formulate attacks. And so again, we have the cyber attacks, we have social engineering and physical attacks. And just like we mentioned on the blue team side, if there's a concept you're not sure about, you can click on the question mark, brings you to the wiki, and explains what that action does, not only in the simulation, but also what the real world application is. It's also important to note that just like the blue team, when we were operating as the blue team, we had that active adversary against us, whether it was a human opponent or our red team, blue team AI, in that case, the red team AI. Well, the same thing applies here. When you're operating as the red team, the blue team is going to be either an active human opponent working against you, trying to counter your every move, or it's going to be the blue team AI, acting in a way just like a real human blue team would. We can take our actions again through the action tree or by clicking on the category-based actions. They're the same thing, they're just divided up by category. The red team also has the aspect of research and skills. So for example, each of these skills represent different types of vulnerabilities and exploits that you have to upskill or level up in order to be better at those vulnerabilities or exploits, or have a better chance of succeeding at those types of attacks. So let's go ahead and research some default credentials out there on the internet and see if we can improve our electronic social engineering skills. That brings us down to no more resources, so we'll end our turn. Just like the blue team, you'll see that we have notifications that let us know what's going on in the simulation, what we did, why it's good, why it may be bad. We have the action log here that also tells us what we have in progress and what we've done. We do have 2 resources we can spend, but I'm going to go ahead and end my turn. We see here we've got more things done. Our OSINT is completed, our open source intelligence. So now we can start to move into finding more information about our adversary. We can either do a host scan from the internet, or we can go into our action tree. So we'll perform that host scan from the internet. And let's go ahead and also do some physical recon so that we can figure out what the target is and move on site. We've discovered some assets here. We don't know exactly what they are. We just see that they're unknown assets with some IP addresses, a little bit of information, but we can now start to discover more information. We can click on them and see we have port scan available. Also, you'll see port scan has now been unlocked in the action tree. Both the blue team and the red team have prerequisites. You saw this on the blue team side as well. The lines, it enforces prerequisites, things that must be done before you can unlock other actions. This helps enforce good cybersecurity defensive posturing behavior. This also on the red team enforces proper red team methodology. All right, so we've completed our physical recon, but notice we've also finished our port scan. Just like the blue team, this is detailed but not technical. So we didn't have to do command line, nmap scans, anything that we do on the red team side. We don't have to know code. We don't have to write exploits. We don't have to know how to do anything on the command line. It's all point and click. It's just conceptual and strategic. So we didn't have a list of ports to decipher, but we do get more information. We see that the port scan has yielded more information about the device here. We now know at least it's a network device. We know it's been port scanned by that icon there. So now we can move on to the next phase of the kill chain, which is service enumeration. And we can also continue to move on to find out more information about other devices. All right, so now we see that service enumeration has yielded yet more information. In real life, service enumeration would be using more complicated tools, command line tools, but here we're not worried about that. We don't have to worry about that. We can see that it yielded more information. We now know it's a firewall. So we could even move on to right now a password attack, which would simulate brute forcing, dictionary attacks, things like that. We can also continue to move down through the kill chain now and look for vulnerabilities. So we will go ahead and look for some public vulnerabilities. We'll do a service enumeration here. And let's go ahead and also do a password attack. So we did find some public vulnerabilities, but it looks like our password attack probably failed here. We'll see the password attack failed, but also we did get some new vulnerabilities. We see that it has outdated firmware. If we'd like to execute an attack on that firewall, we click on it, click attack, and instead of having to manually write an exploit, run complicated tools, we'll simply select the vulnerability. We only have the one here. Choose our objective, which is to gain control of or manipulation of that asset or denial of service in this case. Let's try to gain control. And it's queued up there for attack. And we see that the attack was successful. We've also got some other awards like completing a complete cyber kill chain. The attack was successful. And now we have a pivot available. So you'll see right there, we've got some visibility of some other devices. We can look and see what those are. It looks like it's a router. But most importantly, we see the evil skull and the red coloring of the firewall, which indicates we now have a foothold. We can now pivot from here and do a host scan from this device. And once that's completed, we can see we found a whole host, pun intended, of devices here as a result of having this foothold on the firewall. And we can continue to move laterally through this environment. We can do things like plant ransomware, install malware, data exfiltration, and all of the different actions you would expect to see throughout the red team methodology. As I mentioned before, we can also execute social engineering attacks like spear phishing attacks. We don't have to go through the detailed process of setting these things up. For example, if we wanted to execute an attack campaign, we would select email phishing campaign, a social media campaign, or a watering hole campaign. You would just select that and execute it. While it's queued up, it would take a few turns to get set up, and then from there on out, you have your watering hole attack set up. Let's say that I didn't want to do that after all, I wanted to pull that out. I can pull that from the queue because it's not committed yet. Let's change location. Let's go on site. Right here, the only place that we can go is on the perimeter. All right, so it looks like we've changed location. You can see the background has changed. Looks like we're on the outside of a chain link fence. Also, if we switch to the mode view, you'll see this is switched from our local area, where it look like a city map, to the outside of a plant, which is the environment that we're playing here. So we could continue to change locations. If we go to change location again, now we see we can go back to our remote location. We can start to move into the corporate office or move further into the plant. And then we have different options available to us, such as physical entry, social engineering type entries.